Hey there, Rednecks, Preppies, Redneck Preppies. It's me, the Redneck Preppy. How you doing today? Great. Good. So recently I made a rather declarative video on why I thought we've experienced the end of the norm, or at least what we considered to be the norm, in the military surplus firearms market. Simply put, in my opinion, it's over. From now on, we can only expect increasingly expensive firearms. There's another side of the milsurp market that I didn't touch upon, and that's the side of the arms importers. In recent years, some importers have left the market for various reasons, whether simple retirement to the business becoming increasingly difficult to turn a profit on. For Canadian companies, there's a few reasons for that, which include international competition, having to pay in American dollars, and foreign nations hiking prices. Now, I'm going to say at the outset that I'm not some super connected guy in the gun world, but I know some people who know some people. I'm reasonably well versed on the Canadian import scene. Unfortunately, no American companies would return my phone calls so I could get their perspective. And I will remember each of them when this channel becomes a major player. Just kidding. That said, I have to believe that American importers are facing some of the same challenges that Canadian companies are. And those challenges inform how much of a pain in the neck it's becoming in terms of time, effort, and money to obtain military surplus firearms and ammunition. Commercial ammunition as well, from overseas. Yes, I know there is domestic production of a lot of stuff, but if you're someone who lives in the world of military firearms like I do, much of the stuff you shoot are European surplus firearms, and the ammunition you're running through them is typically European surplus, or it's commercial production from companies like Purvi Partisan or Cellier and Balot, for example. Also, I can't get too specific with costs. Not surprisingly, no one really wanted to share them with me. So I can't really tell you what an individual rifle starts out costing and what its eventual cost is to the gun store that you're buying it from. That and it depends on so many factors, including where a firearm originated and where it ends up. At any rate, let's get started. So I'm talking to one Canadian arms importer whose experiences were kind of shared amongst others that I spoke to. He explained his train of challenges that it takes from getting surplus from its starting point to a store shelf, and I gotta admit it's eye-opening. First, for this process to even start, the arms importer has to successfully win the tender to acquire the arms and or ammunition that a country or agency is looking to sell. As I explained in the video where I argue that the days of easy military surplus collecting was over, countries know what their surplus is worth on the retail market, and they want as close to that price as possible. Understandably. So in countries where surplus firearms tend to be cheaper at retail than other countries, they're already facing a bit of an uphill fight because the importers from other countries might offer more per rifle or round than they can. One of the few and limited edges that Canada does have compared to, let's say, the United States, is we currently have no laws barring importation of surplus from countries like Russia and China. That said, as I also explained in that recent video, the days of importation of Russian rifles and ammunition from Europe are largely done anyway. So let's say our importer wins the tender. Now that his problems begin. He's got to get that surplus from the arms depot to the ship in order to get it home. And depending on where he bought that surplus, the process could be expensive or really expensive. First, he's got to cough up the money for the surplus, obviously, but also any other fees and taxes that the originating nation levies on these sorts of shipments. If he's dealing with a country that ranks high on the corruption list, he may have to cough up money to officials several times throughout the process before the surplus even gets on the boat. You can call those payments whatever you like. Cost of rifle goes up. Now he has to arrange transport from the depot. Most countries have pretty strict regulations on shipping arms and ammunition, so you can't just throw this stuff on the back of Europe's version of a U-Haul truck and call it a day. Again, depending on where you are, you may need to contract with specific transport companies and follow strict and expensive rules on how your prize is to be moved. Cost per rifle goes up. Okay, so you finally got your surplus from the depot down that country's byways and highways, and it's time to get it on the ship. Here's where it's going to start to get even more expensive. First, did you buy enough to fill an entire shipping container or multiple containers completely? It doesn't matter if your shipping container has a single rifle in it or it's as packed as tight as can be. The cost is basically going to be the same. So if you only have enough stuff to fill, let's say 3/4 of a container instead of a full container, well, cost per rifle goes up. You did, though, buy enough to completely fill one or more containers. Congratulations. Now you have to pay to get that stuff onto the ship, and the labor in ports is expensive as hell and rule-bound in a way that would impress any bureaucrat. Cost per rifle goes up. Arms and ammunition finally on the ship. Congratulations. Now you're paying to ship the stuff from wherever you're from. Did I mention that shipping this stuff across the blue water is filled with its own rules and regulations, and a lot of companies tack on extra charges because of that? Or some companies won't even carry it at all, and that leaves other countries that will do so, but at a higher price. Cost per rifle goes up. Okay, it's finally in the same country you are. If it arrived at a port afar from where you are, of course, you're paying to ship it to wherever you are. Cost per rifle goes up. And it's finally in your warehouse. Time to price that rifle to sell to individual gun stores. Won't be cheap like the old days. That gun store is going to be paying far more in wholesale price than what used to be the retail price. And then that store sets the price for you. Probably not that much higher than what they paid for it, because the markup on firearms isn't actually very much. How much depends on what it is. They're hoping you spend some money on higher margin items so they can keep the lights on. Support your local gun store. And that's why some companies, at least in Canada, have gotten out of the surplus arms and ammunition importation business. It's far more regulated and expensive than it used to be just a few years ago. At every step of the process, they're subject to a myriad of regulations and financial costs, multiplied by how many countries they may have to ship through to get to port, and finally, where they operate from. Some of the people that I've spoken to say that the headaches cost more than the profit that they actually eke out of the product. So they're leaving the business. And that's part of the reason why you're seeing less military surplus firearms and ammunition and some types of commercial ammunition on your store shelves. Importers are finding it increasingly difficult to source stuff at a price that makes sense for their market. And that's contributing to the growing prices of firearms that are already here. As I argued in a recent video, we live in a secondary market where more hands are clamoring for the same or fewer available number of existing firearms. Even in, Biden and Trudeau's economists understand how supply and demand affects prices. Arms importation has become increasingly consolidated both in Canada and the United States, with fewer companies in the business. Some have gone out of business. Others have decided to get out of business. They've just given up. So the next time you arch an eyebrow at your local gun store about how much the fresh off the boat surplus costs compared to what it used to, understand that higher price didn't begin with the clerk in front of you, the middleman, or the importer. It began the moment the tender was announced and the foreign country knew what it wanted per rifle and round. You aren't the only one paying more. At any rate, I hope you found today's video to be vaguely entertaining and somewhat informative. As always, take care of those surplus firearms because you might not see any more of their type anytime soon. Take care and bye-bye.